Hello and g'day. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a paper junk journal cover using a recycled book. I've got a tip for you so you know what to look for when you're going to get your book to recycle as a cover. These are Reader's Digest books. This one here, I've already taken the text block out. This one is 7 3/4 inches by 5 inches. So that's a pretty good size. This one here, it comes, all of these Reader's Digest come with a jacket on it. So you take the jacket off and then you've just got your hard cover, right? It's a hard cover that we're interested in, not so much the pages. We can use the pages in other projects, but what I want you to look for is not just the size. This one here is a little different to that one, not by much, it's just a bit shorter. I want you to take into consideration that if you use A4 or letter size, you want to be able to pick a cover that's going to fit that paper. So your pages are going to go inside of these covers nicely. So if you fold an A4 in half, you're going to get an A5 size page, and the same with this one. So if you pick something really big, if you fold an A4 or a letter size in half, your cover is going to be too big. So you have to find an alternative pages size. You have to think outside the square and make all your pages a lot bigger. So for starting off, I suggest that you keep your covers a bit smaller so you can use your letter size paper and your A4 size papers. What you also need to look for is a separation between the spine and the text block. And what I mean by that is if you put something down here, it's free, it's hollow. And we call that a hollow back. So this text block is not glued to this spine area here. It's all free inside there. However, the pages are glued to the cover at the front and they're glued to the cover at the back. So if you're going to recycle a book cover, this is the style of book that I want you to go and look for. If this was glued to that, avoid it. Don't pick those ones, pick these. So let's get started and I'll show you how to use this cover to turn into a junk journal. All right, now the first thing we need to do is separate this area here. And we're also going to separate this area here so I can pull this text block out. Get a sharp knife and we're going to break this seal here. You can pull your pages out here and get them out of the way a little bit, just so you can see what you're doing. Now the idea of it is to cut down here without cutting through that area there. We don't want to cut that area there. See this here? This is all I want to do, is I just want to break that gauze there. I don't want to cut through there. If you start cutting through there, you're going to cut all the way out here. So I only want to pull that text block out. See, I can sort of get my fingers through there a little bit. So I can just get my fingers in there and I'm just going to very gently pull that down there. And just cut that little bit of gauze, because that's all that's holding that together there. You can nearly rip it, but I'm not going to rip it because I don't want to force anything. And just free that up. And that's released that front area there. These pages here, we can cut them out and we'll cut them very gently. Again, run your knife down the side of that, being careful not to cut through that spine area. Okay, we've got to do the same on the back. So there's the start of our cover. We need to pull that out a little bit to expose that same area there. This is a little bit harder to do the back side, I find, of these Reader's Digests. So if my fingers aren't in your road, it doesn't matter which end you start from, the top or the bottom, but it does matter that you keep your fingers away. Just fiddle around with it until you get where you want it to be. I'm going to move these pages again because I need to be able to see where that gauze is. I'm going to take them off. Now, I'm not just going to go and get my knife and pull it down there because that spine is in the road. But see, now I can see between the cover and the book block. I'm going to pull it out. I'm actually pulling that left side and I'm very carefully cutting through there. Reader's Digests are very easy to cut through the spine, so be careful. See how easy it was to rip the gauze then? You're better off doing that than you are accidentally cutting through the gauze and ripping that hinge that's already made for us, because we're going to use this hinge. We don't have to remake it. It's already made for us. So we'll just trim this back here. Just going to tidy it up a little tiny bit, and I'm going to re-glue that down. Right, now I've patched that up. We're ready to go ahead and make a cover. The weight of the scrapbook paper is important. Like this piece here is a bit firmer than this. If you've used scrapbook paper or you've got some in your stash, you'll know what I mean. Some of it's not as thin as copy paper, it's a better quality. Then you've got your medium weight that almost turns into a cardstock. And then you've got your heavier, again, that's a bit like the Tim Holtz quality, that's quite heavy. I wouldn't use that, and I'd be very careful. Probably this weight here is about the maximum I would go. So you want it reasonably light. You don't want it too heavy. So I'm using more of the paper style, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to cover. Covering a recycled book cover is a little bit easier than covering a junk journal cover made from scratch. We're going to use scrapbook paper. I've got this one here picked out, and this is the paper that I'm going to use for this area here. So I'm going to use the green as this area here, and I'm going to use the grey as this area here. The reason I'm using two colours is because scrapbook paper is 12 inches wide. It's not wide enough to cover my book. See, it goes from edge to edge. There's nothing there. There's not enough paper for me to turn over the edge and cover the book. So it's way too short. So what I have to do is I have to cut it down the middle and put this in the middle and extend it out. So this will be my piece that I use to make this piece wider. Okay, so what we're going to do first off is do that. So I need this piece to be as wide as this book cover, plus an inch there and an inch there. So what I'm going to do for this one, just to make it easier, is I'm just going to make it half. To make my 6-inch piece, save me measuring, I just fold it in half, put a nice crease there, and then just cut the tiniest slither off that, and that will separate the two pieces. So now I've got my front and my back piece. So I'm going to use the most decorative part for the front and the not so decorative part for the back. because we've got to turn it over, so the pattern piece goes on the outside of the book and the white piece goes on this side of the book. You'll see what I mean if I turn it over. That's what we need to see, but I want to put it that way. So I want to see the pattern on the outside of the book. So you can turn it whichever way you want, whichever way your pattern paper goes. So I know that it fits quite well there. So I'm going to mark myself a 1-inch border here. This is just a shortcut way to be able to work out how big you need your cover. You can do lots of measurements and get real fancy with math and everything, but I'm no good at math and measurements and everything. I just like to use my eye and whatever's practical. So I know I want a 1-inch border around my book cover here. So I'm going to put it back on the corner and just check that. And then I'm going to come back and put another 1-inch border across the top here and do that there like that. Now, just to make sure it's square, I need to mark that there, and I need this to be straight. I need to double check that I haven't drawn that line in crooked. So I need 9.5 inches to there, and I'm checking that that is also 9.5 inches, and it's pretty darn close. So I'm going to cut that piece off at the 9.5 inch mark, just to get rid of this piece that I don't need. Then I'm going to mark in my 1-inch piece. I need to work from my right because I'm right-handed. And that's given me my cover area there with my fold over areas to bring back to the inside of the cover. There. Now I need 2 of these. One, this is my front piece and this is my back piece. So again, I need to work out which piece I'd prefer for my back. So at this stage, if I turn that over, this is now going to show on the back of my book cover, this area here. I'll lose 1 inch of this pattern piece at the bottom, and I'll lose 1 inch there at the side. So I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to use this piece as my guide to just cut this line off here. So I end up with 2 identical pieces. So that one goes there and that one goes there. What we do need to make sure of is that this here does not come past this gap here. All right, I don't want my paper to come over to here. I want it to stop before this gap here, the hinge. Okay, so I don't want it there. I want it to stop before it. So I know by having that 1 inch mark there that that's where it's going to stop before the hinge. Okay, because otherwise you'll have too much paper built up in that hinge, and we want that hinge to open freely. And if it's too thick, you're going to obstruct it. So now we've got that there. We need to make sure that we've got our join piece that's in the middle that is now going to fill this gap, because we've separated that 12-inch piece to make it wider. We've got another piece that we need to put in the middle to be able to fill that gap. So this is going to be our decorative piece for the middle. You've got to work out how wide you want this. You've got to work out whether or not you want this piece to be just a little bit more, or a lot. You work out exactly where you want it to fall. Like on this book, it's quite narrow. You might want it here and you might want it here. Because it's a custom made cover, you can put it wherever you want. Once this is glued down, this piece will be glued over the top of it, so it really does not matter about where these end as long as they're not over the hinge. And when you see me do this, you'll understand a bit more what I mean. If you're a total beginner and you got a bit confused, then you'll actually see it. So this piece here is a little bit narrow. It's not even 3.5 inches. So if I wanted it to be 4 inches, I would need to cut a new piece. So I'll cut a new piece, and then I'll show you the difference between one this wide and one 4 inches wide where it falls. Now I'm going to cut that down. Then this piece here has to be the same height as this piece here because we're joining it. So if I bring that over here, right, now I'm going to turn it over again, and I'm going to mark my 1 inch fold line at the top because there's no corners on this piece. It's only a top and bottom fold because it's going in the center to cover the spine. And this is again still working on the outside. So if I turn that over, and I'll turn that over, and I'll turn that over, we've now got our cover extended by 2 inches just by adding this piece in the center. You'll see less of your pretty cover paper using a wider spine cover and more of your pretty cover using a narrower spine cover. But you do need to be careful that you don't make this sheet too narrow, because once it goes around from here, it's got to cover this piece here, that and the gap and the spine and the gap and the piece here, so that you can't see the join. Make sure you leave enough room for that. That's why I'm going to use the 4 inch one just to be certain. Now we've got these ready to start and cover our cover. What I'm going to do is show you what can happen with a paper that's got a white backing. It's also got a white edge. So when I pick up my journal, I don't want to be able to see that white edge. So I'm going to use the hickory smoke and just distress ink the edge of this paper, just to get rid of that white edge. I'm not colouring any of the front of the paper, just the white edge all the way around. I like to suggest that you start covering from the back, because if you make a little boo-boo from the back, you're not going to look at the front of the book and pick your mistake every time you look at your book. You're going to be able to do something with it from the back. What we now need to do is cut off the bulk of the corner. I've just made a video on this jig here. What this jig does is it cuts off this bulk piece here of the corner, this piece of paper here. This is what we call mitering the corner. If you were to fold all of this paper over here and try and bring it back into the corner, one, you might get a messy corner. Two, it's going to be quite bulky. By cutting off the paper here and leaving enough room to cover this thickness of the book board, you're going to get a really nice mitered corner. So let me show you how it works. See the shape here? It's the shape of that corner. When I turn it over, that fits right on the corner of the book, and I push it up snug on that corner. So first off, I'm going to line my book board up on the corner. Then I'm going to push the corner of the book into this jig here making sure that it is in the corner. And then I'm going to use my knife and I'm going to cut that corner off right there. See that? And that corner is now gone. So what this now will let me do is get rid of all that paper bulk there and fold this over and have a nice neat mitered corner. We do the same for this one. Put the jig on that corner, make sure it's on there, and then just run your knife along the edge of this board and cut off that corner. I'm going to use the Helmer fabric glue today. It glues paper to paper really well and it doesn't wrinkle and buckle my paper. I've transferred it from the purchase bottle into a squeezy bottle. And this squeezy bottle is a Sugar Bell, the sweet Sugar Bell, and it's got a lovely fine tip on it. This is made for icing sugar. So I'm just going to squeeze all the way around. I'm not going to do the edge first because that tends to dry quite quickly. I'm going to do the center first. So I'm going to go all the way around the edge, following those lines. This one here, I don't want to go too close to the edge because I don't want my glue to leak out. I'm going to pick this up, I'm going to line it up, square with them lines. The lines are good to mark if you haven't made one of these books before. And just push that down. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to use my bone folder. You can use the palm of your hand. You can use a roller, a brayer. And I'm just going to flatten that out a little bit. All right. Now I'm also going to bend over that piece of paper. You can do it with your thumb and the palm of your hand. You need to pre-crease that. It is not the end of the world if you forget to do this, because you can just go ahead and do it without it. Now we're going to get ready to take care of these corners. I'm going to do this piece, the long piece first, and I'm just going to run a bead of glue down on the edge of this book board here. Again, not too thick, just enough. Nothing squishing out. Across the edge here, squiggles, and along the book board itself. If you want your edge of your page to lay flat, just put a tiny bit of glue there as well. So we're going to start from the middle and fold that over. You're going to press it a few times just to make it sit down. Just flatten it. You'll see a little bit of glue come out. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Just happens. You can use your bone folder to get that lovely sharp crisp edge here on your book. Right, now we're going to take care of these corners. Again, that is the top, this is the bottom, so let's start at the bottom just to have a bit of a practice. Get your fingernail and fold that over and push it onto the top of this board here as you're folding it in towards the center of the cover, and you end up forming a little triangle there. Once you've formed that triangle, just crease it a little bit, and that's going to help you when you fold that over. That's called a mitered corner. That's what this jig is all about. It is what we use to miter the corners. Do the same again. Run a bead of glue all the way across the top of the book board, up around the flap, squiggles on the top of the book board. I know I'm working at the bottom, but I'm still referring to the top layer. Don't squeeze your bottle, just use the residue there. Fold it over from the middle. Because you've just pressed that corner in, it's going to follow itself properly and lay down perfectly. Now I'm not going to squish that corner down just yet with my bone folder. I'm going to come back and show you a little tip on how to deal with that. So we're going to do the same again. Let's push this corner down. Get up close. I'm going to, from the edge here, roll my fingernail around and press that back in towards this book cover this way until it forms a little triangle like that. So I'm covering over the top of that book board, pinching it with my fingernail, and I've got that very neat little triangle formed there. Okay, same as we just done, a bead of glue along there. I'm going to do this 4 times. I don't need to do too much there, it's just going to follow itself on the corner. And because I pre-creased that fold here, it behaved itself nicely. Like I said, I'll come back and show you in a minute when that glue is a little drier, because while it's wet it'll still be a little bit slippery, but we've mitered the corners quite well. Let's do the same on the front. I'm going to move a little bit faster on this one, not much, but just try and get yourself some confidence here. Squiggles. Around the edge. Any gaps you feel that you've missed, fill them in now. Lay your book board in its proper place. While it's slippery, you can just ever so gently just move it. Turn it over. I'm just flattening the glue. I'm not really pressing too hard. Back over. I'm going to turn it around this way because it's easier for me being right-handed. Place my jig on the corner, nice and snug, making sure it's in place. Cutting that corner off. Taking it away. Back in place, making sure it is in the correct angle and place, and taking that away as well. All right. There we go. We're going to pre-fold again. Move that out of the way to pre-fold your next pieces. And pre-fold. Gluing on the edge of the book board, not over gluing. Over gluing, if you make it too wet, you may rip your paper. Squiggles on top of the book board. Just helps it to have something to grab to when you turn it over. I'm going to put the tiniest little bit of glue into those corners, folding it over, and it will grab down. You can feather that glue out on the edge if you like. It's not 100% necessary to do because we're going to cover that piece there anyway. So I'm going to make sure I've got a nice sharp edge going on there. The glues come out. Always seems to be this bottom corner that it does it to me. There. I'm going to come back and pinch my triangle over. Put it in place. I'm going to pinch the other one at the same time. Get that glue coming out at a nice fine line. Feathering, glue it over. See, I don't even really come back and touch that corner. Once I've pinched it in with my fingernail, it just seems to stay there. And if anything, just use your bone folder. I've already pinched that corner, so it's going to stay in place because it's paper. Across the top of the book board. Fold it over, making sure that it is all tight here on this side and this side. Pushing it down. Another perfectly mitered corner from the inside and the outside. Now I'm going to turn it back over the other way, and the tip to flattening your corners is to just put it on there, push it down with the palm of your hand, put it on there, push it down with the palm of your hand or your finger. I'm not going to do it to that one yet. I'll just let it dry a little tiny bit more. Then you can run that there just to make those edges nice and crisp. And we'll do the same to this one when those corners dry a little tiny bit more. What we need to do when we add this centerpiece is we need to find the middle. I've got a center ruler, so I just grab that and I'm going to bring that on here, mark my centerpiece there, turn it over. This paper has no right and wrong way to the pattern, this particular piece. So I'm good to go. It doesn't matter which end I use. There's my center. Then I need to mark the center of my spine. Now I can do that by measuring from here to here as well. So if I used my ruler, it's so close to being the width of the book cover, I can temporarily flatten this spine to get that. It is a curved spine, but because it's made of cardboard, it is a little bit flexible, so it's letting me flatten it for a little while, and I'm going to then reshape it. So I'll just check that I am in the middle. Yep. Okay, so I just want to round that back up again because I've just been fiddling with it. Just give it a little persuasion, just squeezing the edges like that and just getting it back into shape because I forced it closed. Now what I want to do is I want to lay just the spine area onto this area here. So I'm going to match that line up and that line up with this line and this line. Okay, so they'll fall right there. Okay, so to start doing that, I'm going to put a little bit of glue just on the spine. No, not on the hinges, just on the spine. Same again, I'm going to go to the center first and then my edges, so my edges don't dry before my centre does. Then I'm going to run a bead of glue all the way around the edge here. I'm going to hold my book up for a minute, my cover. I'm going to pop that there, make sure my front is in the right place. If I had a pattern that I had to be careful with, then I'll line those two lines up. We need this to be straight. We need to have the same gap from there to there and there to there, because if we don't, you're going to have your pattern like that. If there's a big difference between there and there, it'll show on the front of your cover. So do check that. I'm going to use this ruler for that. Do check that it's right. So we've got 4 inches from there to the edge of the paper, and we've got 4 inches from there to the edge of the paper. So I know that I haven't got a crooked cover. This will just fall into place as well. So I'm going to fold this over and gently follow that curved spine with my fingers. I'm going to use my hand like that here and just gently follow the shape of that curved spine, because it's not flat. If you've got a book that has got a flat spine, you can lay it on the table and do it. But you'll see here that that's got that little curve, and we need to deal with it a little bit different. If it's flat, you could just lay it on the table and go for it. But because it's curved, I've got to do it a little bit different. Use the palm of your hand, turn it around and do the other side and get into those grooves. Now I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to start gluing. That's the hinge there, that little soft area there. I'm going to do the back first again. Always practice doing your back first. Gluing that hinge. I'm going to glue all the way out to the edge of the paper. Squiggles again. I'm going to come not too close to the edge. This is definitely something that you don't want the glue to come out from there to there. You definitely don't want that. So I'm going to feather that with my thumb, just going like that and pulling it out to the edge like that. And that there. Then I'm going to just deal with the hinge first, pushing that paper down into the hinge. This darker paper is a little harder to see, but you can just see the hinge a little bit there. I'm just going to now emphasize the hinge a little bit more with my bone folder. No sharps here. You'll regret it if you push this through your paper, because you'll pretty much have to start again. Then I'm going to lay that area flat there, and the objective is no glue coming out of this line here. If you've put too much glue in there, it's got to come somewhere. When you squish it with this, it will push it out. So over gluing will not make you happy. Okay. So I don't know, can you see the trench? You probably can't. Not a good choice of paper for a demo. So this time I'm going to turn it around, do the same again, fill that hinge, the pre-made hinge for us. You're going to love using recycled books for this method. It's a great technique. Feathering it out here is a really good move. I'm not touching this center spine, just the gap here where the hinge is. Pushing my finger down into the gap and then on the front cover. Again, I'm using my bone folder to get down into that hinge. It's a pretty wide hinge on this particular cover. And then flatten that down to make sure I've got good contact there. Now I'm just going to gently close my book, work a bit more on my thumb pushing into that front hinge. You can just see that hinge forming. Turn it over, do the same on the front. You can just see that hinge forming there, and it's turning out fabulous. Okay, now we're going to lay that down and we're going to fold these two pieces in. Same again, running some glue across the top board, across there, keeping away from the edge, squiggles, a little bit of glue on the board itself, stopping before there and before there because I don't want to clean up a mess. Feather, and there. Again, we're going to train this with my thumb and the palm of my hand to turn over. It's paper. It's a lot different to use than fabric. If you've made a fabric journal cover, you'll really notice the difference. So we're going to persuade that to turn over and flatten it down. Now I'm not going to close this just yet. I'm just going to push it down with my fingers and reshape that curve a little bit. See there? I'm not going to force it just yet. I just want that glue to grab there just for a second, because this glue is fast acting. So we can get it down into that hinge there and there. It's quite wet there. Be careful not to force it. While that's drying, I'm going to come back up to this end and do the same again. Pushing on the edge of my board and running my fingers along it to put my glue down, away from the edge, squiggle, 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 a line across the board, the book board, stopping short of the edge and starting short of the edge. Feather, so that I don't make a mess, and it's got good contact. Wipe the glue off on my board. Any glue that's on your fingers, rub it off now, because you're going to now start over to the back of your board. Very gently start folding that over, nothing forced. It will start folding when it's good and ready. You just start going from one area to this area, to this area, to this area. Don't try and make it all fold in one go, and just keep going backwards and forwards until you feel it. Oh, there it is. It's giving. And then it's there. It's down. I'm going to just go into that hinge. You can see where the hinges are. They're right there. And that has covered perfectly. Again, I'm just going to use my fingers, pinching and shaping that little curved spine. Shaping it. I'm not trying to close my book just yet. Just going to leave it for a little second. Go back and check this one. This is drying good. This glue tends to feel cold when it's wet. You can feel it through the paper that it feels cold. So when it feels cold, it's still wet. So you just wait for that coldness to go away, and you'll know that it's starting to form into its final curing. And just use the edge of this bone folder, nothing forced. Okay, remember, nothing forced. Now I'm just going to find my front. This is my front, my top, This is my tail, and I'm just gently going to persuade my book to close. Nothing forced. If you see your glue letting go here, just start smoothing it down again and don't close it. Just let it dry. Just leave it for a little while and let that shape happen. If it doesn't bother you to go ahead and just keep going with it and closing it, go ahead and close it. But I personally have a lot of patience, so I can leave this sit here and wait a little bit longer and then take the next step and go slower and slower and slower and just very slowly start to close my book. And I've got no wrinkles. And that is a perfectly bound or a perfectly covered recycled book cover. Okay, if you're a fiddler, keep fiddling. If you're not, just set it up and leave it to dry. And I'll be back in a minute. This is dry enough for us to line now. The way I've made this particular cover is so the stitches are going to be exposed on the outside. You could make this a hidden spine cover, no problem at all. But I'm just making it as a blank cover for you to make that decision. So I'm just going to use this to line the inside. It is almost the right size. Actually, it is the right size. See how when I put that there like that, it looks like I've got a little bit of space there and I've got a little bit of space there. But when you watch what happens, you watch that side and that side, when I push it in the middle, it shrinks. See, it's got smaller and it shows more of the green there and more of the green there. Okay, so just be aware of that. If you're using a curved spine and you're lining the inside of your book with paper, just be aware the curved spine takes up a little bit more room, and when you push it down, it shortens. So all I need to do is work out how tall I want this now. So I just mark that here. So it's hard to see, but I've just marked it so that it's that much shorter than the bottom of my cover. So I'm going to do the same on here. Because I didn't make this cover, I'm going to measure each side separately because I don't know if it's square or not. So now I'll just cut that piece off. Find my mark there and there. I'm just going to check it to make sure that it's where I want it. Both sides. Yes. But I'm also going to get rid of these white edges. Same as I did before, I'm going to use my hickory smoke and colour the edges. I'm going to turn that around that way because I just like the paper pattern up that way. I'm going to move my book cover that way and turn that around so that when I turn it back over, I know it's the right way. I'm going to throw my glue on here, and I'm actually going to start gluing on the front and the back and then the spine and then around the edge, because I know that by the time I get through this, it could start to dry. So I've always got a bit of a plan worked out about how I'm going to glue down. I'm going to feather these edges out because I want it to lay really flat. And that's why I've done these edges last, because otherwise that glue may have very well dried a bit on the edges. Certainly is a bit messy doing it this way. You've got to be very careful not to put any glue on the right side of your paper. But once you've done this a few times, you do get used to it. Turn it back around the right way, get this glue off my fingers before I turn it over. I'm going to bring my cover back in, I'm going to line it up. It stays slippery, but not for very long. Push it in the middle and then line it up here. Push it in the middle and line it up here. So by pushing it in the middle gives me that control over where it's going to sit. A little tiny bit of sliding can happen just for not very long. Okay, now I'm going to just flatten it down, and because I've got no glue on the edges, I've only just feathered that out. I know I'm not going to have a big issue with it poking out everywhere or squishing out everywhere. I'm going to use the palm of my hand to just get into that curved spine and just gently start training it to close the book. Turn it around, do the same again over this side. I'm not pushing it, I'm not rushing it, I'm not trying to make it do anything too fast. It's doing a bit of creaking and crinking here. I'm going to use my bowl folder to get down into them hinges. The edge of it only, no points, no sharps. Same on this side. I'm just holding my cover up a tiny bit and I'm using that part of my bone folder, nothing pointy at all. Now I can start pushing that down there. I'm not pushing anything onto that curved spine because I don't want it to go out of shape. All right. Slowly closing, making sure that I'm not changing the shape of my curved spine. Anywhere you see it starting to lift, push it down with your thumb and your fingers by pinching, because this is where we need that contact. We need nothing lifting here on the edges. This has turned out quite good. Pretty happy with this. Patience. You need to show patience. Once you've got this, you've got it forever. You'll keep this skill and you'll be able to make these covers and be confident every time that they're going to turn out okay. These are eco-dyed papers from Elizabeth Carotti, our wonderful admin here at Junk Journal Ideas. Thanks, Elizabeth. I love them lots. The colours look beautiful with this. Thanks for tuning in. I know this is going to help you a lot. I know you'll get a lot out of this cover series. How to make a paper junk journal cover using a recycled book video. Don't forget, I've also done the one on how to make a paper junk journal cover from scratch. You can either use this, the recycled book method, or you can use the paper junk journal cover from scratch method. I'm Donna. Thanks for watching and bye for now.